And how the hell could Bond be so stupid? I give him 00 status and he celebrates by shooting up an embassy. Is the man deranged? And where the hell is he? In the old days, if an agent did something that embarrassing, he had the good sense to defect. Christ, I miss the Cold War. I'm Eddie Webb.
And I'm Chris Spivey.
And today we're going to talk about Casino Royale here on Genreless. One of the things I enjoy about our format is that because I will not bother to try to do these lines in the way the actors did them, it frees me up to kind of do my own spin on these quotes. That is not how Judi Dench portrayed those lines, by the way.
Eddie, are you finally willing to admit something that I brought out in the Punisher recording that you frequently denied, is that you are one of the day laborers on the Punisher set, and now you're still trying to get your big break into Hollywood or even the Bond franchise now because it's owned by Amazon?
Well, I mean, it depends if Amazon shoots in the UK, which is a whole separate up in the air thing because the UK media industry is in tatters thanks to streaming, and the Labour government has basically fucked over everything on top of that, even though they claim to support the arts, but also they want to shove through AI. Anyway, yes, I'm denying.
Well, you don't forget that potentially if they try to record overseas, they'll suffer a heavy tariff from
yeah. It's the funny. It's like if Amazon, which I understand is U.S. based, records outside the U.S., they may get a tariff. But if they don't film in the U.K., then there's a clause in the rights about the James Bond franchise. They may take a penalty. So no wonder the Broccoli sold this franchise, right?
Yeah.
But we're not here to talk about that reboot of the James Bond franchise. Talk about this reboot of the James Bond franchise.
But you sure? Can't we just talk about all the reboots at once?
Well, that's what's so interesting about Casino Royale, right? Like as Chris has alluded to many times, this is not the first movie to be called Casino Royale. In fact, not the first movie based off of the novel Casino Royale. It is the second, but is the first official one / serious one that has ever been done. And so they use this as an opportunity to restart Bond explicitly. But as we've kind of talked about, in my head, I had always kind of thought that each recasting was an implicit reboot. And I even tried to argue that briefly during our Dalton discussion. But honestly, the more we've actually watched the movies and analyzed them, it's just not true. They are clearly intended to have been one continuous run of James Bond's missions from the 60s to the 90s, even though he somehow doesn't age 30 years during the course of that.
So I have mixed feelings about this movie because how they unceremoniously fired Pierce Brosnan. And I've already established last time I was a Pierce Brosnan fan. And
Right.
how all of this went down, from my understanding, was not a gracious, like, Pierce, we've decided to go in a different direction. Would you please step away so we could bring in someone not necessarily younger, but definitely younger than you are to revitalize our franchise and do for us.
So you're saying Pierce Brosnan is the Colin Baker of James Bond franchise?
Yes, I am.
A deeply underrated actor that got some shitty scripts and was fired unceremoniously and unjustifiably.
Yes, just how I would say that Roger Moore is a Tom Baker of the James Bond franchise.
Went on way too long and should have retired earlier.
Correct. And so, all right, Eddie, you may already know this, but from my understanding of how some of this went, and it is sketchy, is that originally, I forgot his name now, was came out again to make another, like, his own Bond movie again.
Mm-hmm.
The other person owned the rights, and he had like Sony backing him this time, and they were going to make like Warhead 2000 or Warhead 2020 or something, and it potentially could have starred Timothy Dalton. And there was a big lawsuit.
Oh no, I'm sorry. We talked about the Dr. Sun product. Is that the one you're talking about?
I don't think so. I think this is different. Like, I forgot his name now, but he's the same guy with like Thunderball and everything else. Was coming back, and this time he had Sony backing him, and there was a lawsuit between essentially Eon and Sony over this, and in the end,
Okay.
that's how Sony, I think, got the Spider-Man rights, which suddenly made like they built their house on that.
Wow.
And the Broccoli's here got all their Bond stuff back. So this is how they could make Casino Royale. And that's why there's no
Huh.
longer any threat of another Bond franchise coming out of nowhere.
Huh. That's
And I think
wild.
that all happened here. And I want to say it was, I think they got the right to this before Die Another Day came out.
Okay.
So, like, there's all these other factors here that, if I remember them correctly, because it's been a while since I looked into it, are at play. So that's another reason why I'm so irritated by Pierce, because they got the rights for this before Pierce's other movie.
Well, that does explain a bit of the decrease in quality of the Brosnan films because, if what you're saying is true, what probably happened was at least the last one, maybe the last couple, were kind of just shoved out the door to reassert their rights and say, no, 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 we're making these movies. And for those who don't know, IP law sucks for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that you have to regularly prove that you are using the license or it can be contested, which means the actual time period varies, but 5 years is a pretty common metric. If you don't do something in 5 years of it, people can argue that the franchise is abandoned. Other people can make a ploy to try to acquire those rights. Um, uh,
That's
Brief
why you got
anecdote.
so many Spider-Man movies too.
Right. Actually, I saw an example of this because when I worked at my days expired. I don't care. When I worked at White Wolf, Vampire the Masquerade, one of the clans' name is Gangrel. There was also a professional wrestler named Gangrel. White Wolf and Gangrel had come to a previous arrangement because Gangrel used the name without contacting them. They had a previous arrangement, and that was fine. Um, then after a decade or so off television, he came back for one episode on WWE wrestling with the name Gangrel, and White Wolf said, "Hey, our previous agreement expired. We need to talk about compensation. We had this previous established agreement." And they argued, well, you haven't done anything with the franchise for 5 years, so we have the rights to do this now. And so they had to pull up that they've been using it. And hilariously, what they ended up having to use was the Vampire the Masquerade card game, Vitas, to show we are
Yeah.
still doing stuff because they had just put out a Vitas set that year. It was the last one they had done. And so it's like, look, there's a Gangrel here, so we're still using it. And so the judge upheld that, and I can't speak about the actual settlement for a lot of reasons. But the point is like this is a very real thing. Like you have to show proof of life. That is why that's one of the many reasons why sometimes these franchises get rebooted so fast. Is because they have to show no, we're still interested in this. Um, so sometimes a bad movie that doesn't make money is still good from an IT long-term perspective.
Yeah. And I think the worst part is the Brosnan movies were not, the later Brosnan movies were not great for like writing and a whole bunch of other reasons. And I think they became obsessed with trying to get spin-offs out of those movies, like the Jinx spin-off, almost to replace Pierce. So Pierce fan, still irritated by some of those things. And that's when they just decided to totally go in this new direction with their new Casino Royale rights and everything else to reboot the whole franchise.
Right. Um, so let's
Still
talk about
though,
Daniel
they
Craig.
gave up Spider-Man, Eddie.
I know. Yeah, they did. And in the long-term history, I think obviously Sony probably won that fight. But it's close because uh, well, let's talk about the movie real quick, then I'll go back and talk about Daniel Craig. Um, it grossed 616 million worldwide and made it the fourth highest grossing film of 2006 and the highest grossing James Bond film until Skyfall. So clearly, this was the right call for the Bond franchise was to go in this direction, at least from a financial perspective. Critically, we'll talk about that.
Well,
Um,
we should also
but
probably look at the fact that I think the Bourne movies were out around this time too, right?
yes, as well as the Mission Impossible movies. So uh, there's this weird thing where like the Bourne franchise was meant basically when James Bond was gritty. And the Mission Impossible franchise was basically what if James Bond was American. And if you ever watched the Mission Impossible movies, they pair only a passing resemblance to the original television show. They just basically got the rights to the name and a couple of concepts, and it's basically it. But they did extremely well, and so it's the why is James Bond struggling in this environment that is obviously inspired by James Bond films, because I personally feel like they saw the Bond formula as it was being implemented doesn't work for late 90s, early 2000s. And so those franchises were able to go, here's how we would reinvent it. And so it makes sense for the Broccoli's to kind of go, okay, well, it's been a long time anyway. Now we have the rights free and clear. Let's go ahead and start fresh. And so when Daniel Craig, who, as I understand, primarily got the job from his performance on Layer Cake, which was a
Oh,
crime drama. And
layer
Layer Cake was a
cake.
fantastic movie, honestly.
Do you want to know who also takes a credit though for the Broccoli's deciding to make Casino Royale and make it gritty how it is?
Who?
He's a famed director, Eddie. We've discussed him on the podcast before.
We've talked about a lot of directors in this podcast, over nearly 200 episodes. So
Quentin Tarantino, the man himself, wanted to direct it and said the one he wanted was Casino Royale. And if you hear in interviews with him, I'm the reason that they decided to do Casino Royale how they did. But if I'd made it, I'd put it in the 60s and I would have done it. And so QT goes on a whole stick about him being the reason.
that is a common refrain of people, directors going, I would do James Bond, but I would do it in the 60s. Like, I keep hearing that. Also, a Tarantino Bond film, honestly, would be fucking terrible. But so I mean, I'll go back to the grittiness of it. But Daniel Craig was an extremely controversial choice, particularly in the UK. Hilariously, because Daniel Craig is blonde, was actually the biggest problem with him.
James Blonde, I remember that.
Yes, yeah, James Blonde was the male used that as a headline, and it became a very common refrain, which slid pretty naturally to James Bland, until the movie actually came out, and then critics had to go, "Wow, okay, Bland is certainly not a thing we can use to describe this version of the character."
And so this is nothing against Daniel Craig, who is a striking man, but people also were had more of an idea that Bond should look like a Pierce Brosnan, should look like a Sean Connery, and Daniel Craig does not fit that mold.
Right. Right. But one of the things that came out when the movie actually revealed was that he was the first actor to truly embody the original Ian Fleming version. In fact, there's one quote from Paul Ardent of BBC Films, which is great, which is, Craig is the first actor to really nail 007's defining characteristic. He's an absolute swine. And we've talked about this on the podcast, where Bond in the books is a fucking bastard. And we see that genuinely in Casino Royale.
So the acting wise, I'd agree to, but we also know that Fleming originally envisioned like David Niven as being Bond. So
Right.
the physicality that Craig brings is not Bond.
No,
attitude of like, I'm a cold-blooded killer is Bond.
Right. And that's why, so when I first saw Casino Royale, I really enjoyed the film. I saw it in the theater. Hilariously, my biggest complaint, which I'll get into when we do the recap, I have since completely reversed on, and I have now new complaints. But same thing. I was like, this is the Bond of the books. That's not true. And you're right. The core of the literary Bond is here. But what, in retrospect, we can see, we don't quite see it in this movie, but have the body of the Daniel Craig version of Bond, is that they take the basics of the literary Bond as a starting point, as an origin movie. Because it's interesting you mentioned the Spider-Man franchise. This is really shot like a superhero origin film in a lot of ways, where, especially in the early 2000s superhero film, he would have gotten his costume at the end of the movie. They save his iconic line for the very last line of the movie to kind of show this is now the character you know. So what they do with this reboot is he grows into the Bond that we know from the movies, which is actually a really smart way of threading the needle. It's like you start from the literary Bond, and it eventually becomes the Bond people know, and it's like, oh, okay, that is now James Bond. So both sides of the equation finally can reconcile around this interpretation, and then have all sorts of new problems. But I could see that being a very strong way to resolve this. And also, there's some other back to basic stuff. Like, um, this was a Bond that went back to a lot more practical stunt work. That there's a lot less CGI than there was in all of the '90s era James Bond movies. And we talked about how they started to bring CGI in around Goldfinger, or sorry, Goldeneye. Goldfinger, fuck.
That would have been
Uh,
ridiculous. They would have been like
that would have
drawing
been
on a notepad and putting it on the camera.
right.
That
Just very quickly putting it in front of the camera. Um, no, Goldeneye had a CGI. They moved back from that, partially, I suspect, partially because they saw how well Mission Impossible was doing with practical work.
and I'm not sure if you remember Die Another Day, Eddie,
I do not.
where if it had I forgot her name.
Had an
Had
invisible
famed
car.
actress who is not a friend of the podcast, but it would be awesome if Rosamund Pike went to come and let us interview her in
Mhm.
Die Another Day. And one of the things is, remember right, there's an ice palace that comes out of the water, and James Bond is driving a car over the ice palace. So in short, I'm just saying it was super CGI. It put like Star
Okay.
Wars to shame from how much CGI that movie had. And I don't think it was great CGI, if I remember right.
Right. Right. Um, so I mean, there may have been a case of like, listen, this isn't working for us. Maybe we'll go back to this physical approach that has worked in the past. I can see that being too. But also, it's a good way to make it, if your goal is to make Bond gritty by making it look as real as possible, by keeping things as practical as possible. It's another Andor does this, right? Andor tries to keep things as practical as possible to give it a very different vibe of Star Wars. So it's a good conceit. But to your earlier point about it being gritty, arguably it went too far the other direction. Um, it was censored in just about every major territory it was released in, although censored in different ways. Britain removed some of Le Chiffre's torture scene, which we'll get to, the very infamous torture scene. And two cutscenes in the U.S. version were edited to get to a PG-13 rating. Germany removes the scene where someone's neck gets broken, so on and so forth. Um, the DVD version is pretty much the compiled version of the generally accepted version. So if you stream it playing online, you get the more or less uncensored version. But all of the theatrical versions had slightly different edits to get rid of some of the points. Um, uh, and what's interesting is, in retrospect, some of the edits are scenes that now people go back and go, some of the better scenes of the movie,
Hmm.
uh, uh, like the stairway fight, which I'll get into. So it's an interesting point in time where, uh, 2006 is still at the point where trying to hit very specific ratings, that uh, 12 certificate, that PG-13 rating, is still desirable for a James Bond film. And but they could you could see that they want this to be a little more violent and visceral. So the over the Daniel Craig oeuvre, tastes change and the movies come to meet it into a point where, right around roughly Skyfall 2012 is when it kind of starts to really synthesize. But we're still in a kind of an awkward place where they're still expecting the audience to be the people who went to go see a Pierce Brosnan movie, but that's not really the audience they're actually trying to shoot for. They're shooting for an older audience.
Now that you mention the year specifically, was Daniel Craig the actor for the longest time as James Bond given COVID? I can't remember if we looked into that before. It was
Yes.
either him or Roger Moore, but I think because of COVID, Craig may have like the longest time as Bond.
Yes. In terms of numbers of movies, no. He is the second longest terms of just years.
Years.
Yes, he has 15 years from 2006 to 2021, and as you say, it's because the last movie was supposed to release a couple of years earlier and didn't. So because of that delay, and also, if I understand, some reshooting happens for the last movie. Uh, it's not Spectre. I forget the last movie is. Spectre's the second last movie. Um, but regardless, um, And also is there the reason why Judi Dench also ends up inadvertently getting longest run as M because there's a cameo in the final movie with M, and so it pushes her tenure out to just as long as Daniel Craig's 15 years. Yes,
Hers will
he
be
has.
longer
Oh yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Yes, 30, almost 30 years. We did talk about that. My apologies.
because she was, which is something I want to ask about in a second. Given it's a reboot, but Judi Dench is still there, sort of the same character, but not really the same character.
Uh, it's interesting because uh, uh, she is still considered to be essentially the same character. And let me step back. Guinness Book of World Records lists her as such. That is not a good reason because, for those who don't know, the Guinness Book basically, if you have enough money, you can buy any kind of world record you want. So they're not a charity organization; they're a for pay organization. So that's not
Oh,
necessarily right. Yeah,
shouldn't have told me
it's
that,
not.
Eddie.
Oh yeah, it's not great.
Oh no,
Now you
I'm
could
just figuring out what I want my world record to be now. Man,
right. Um,
um,
uh, uh, World's most tormented black RPG designer. There you go. You can buy that right now.
I was thinking of something more along the lines of like world's fastest stout drinker in under 60 seconds or something like
Right,
that.
right,
Something.
something. Yeah, yeah. Um, but uh, legally, M is and Judicious likeness as M is protected under the same copyright claim between franchises. So legally, she is the same character, which is about the best we can get because otherwise it gets really nebulous. I argue she's not playing the character fundamentally differently between franchises. The big difference is she is the woman has to prove herself to a male-dominated society and to Bonds in the Brosnan movies, whereas she is already the matriarch who controls MI6 with the Iron Fist by the time the Daniel Craig version comes around. That is the only real change in her character portrayal. Otherwise, she's more or less playing the character the same way.
But that of itself is vastly impacts the character of Bond because before you
Yes,
had Bond and her as more professionals completely versus this, which is almost more of a Bond viewing her in a maternal light and her having some favoritism towards his roughness because it's
right,
something.
right. Uh, is there anything else you want to talk about before we get? Because it's not like we're starting to get into the actual talking of the film now.
Yes, who else was potentially Bond other than Craig?
I actually didn't look this part up. I don't know.
So there were some other actors considered, but there's one in particular I want to mention because he is a famed geek actor who went on to become Superman and then The Witcher.
Uh huh.
So this is where Henry Cavill was almost James Bond. I think it came down between Craig and Cavill. And depending on what source you read, some people say that they said he was too young at like 22. Some people say that they told him he wasn't physically built enough to be Bond. My inclination, my inclination is they told him he wasn't built enough to be Bond, and then that's why we now have Superman Cavill.
So I did actually I didn't know that one primarily because as I understand it, part of the reason why he ended up as the lead in The Man from Uncle was because he told this story to Guy Ritchie. And Guy Ritchie's like, "Fuck that! We'll get the Man from Uncle license. We'll show that you could have been Bond."
So I don't know if that's true or not, but I definitely know that Cavill was almost Bond here, or at
Right.
least in iteration.
When the latest rounds of Who's Going to Be Bond came out, Cavill's name floated again, and actually in an interview he said that he's not interested anymore, partially because his career is in a very different place than it was 20 years ago now. But also, he's more or less played someone like Bond in 3 different films now. He was a protagonist, spoiler slash antagonist in one of the Mission Impossible movies. He was again Man from Uncle, and there's one other movie where he played kind of a James Bond style character. So he feels like he's done that already, and very clearly he's at a point in his career where he can bounce between franchises and get nice gigs. So being tied to a franchise like Bond would probably be a step backwards for him at this point. So I could totally see why he's not no longer interested. But it would be
Or I,
fascinating. I think a younger Bond actually would have made some parts of this movie work a little better.
and so I the reason I have a problem believing that is like how much they frequently want to cast Timothy Dalton. You're 18,
Yeah.
come on, be Bond. You're 23, come on, be Bond. So that doesn't feel quite right to have that be part of the narrative. So that's why I wanted to especially mention Cavill because I think Henry Cavill is a great actor. It's done like some incredible work.
Yeah, totally. No, absolutely.
Before we get into it, I know that you're going to talk about the torture stuff here, and that people frequently go back and reference this iteration of Bond as feeling closer to like the Dalton. Some people I might even
Yep.
mention like Lazenby. In the previous Bond movie, the Bond had torture scenes in that movie. So that
Yeah.
established even the groundwork before this happened. And that had a grittier tone to it. Still some horrible CGI, but a grittier tone that I think led the way for this movie.
That's a good point, and that will allow me to play my hands a bit early. When I first saw this, I was like, I love this movie because it is not a Bond film and allows franchise to grow into the Bond formula. Now that we've sat down and actually analyzed the Bond formula, the Bond formula is present in this movie. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so a lot of things people say, "Oh, that's not a Bond movie," is actually happening in this movie. There are a couple of things that are staples of the film that don't happen, and they are valid, and we'll call them out. But there's a lot more of the Bond formula in here than I think people realize because we've been going through it. It's like, oh no, like you said, I mean, the torture scene. We'll get there when we get there, but ultimately, Bond being tortured for information is no different than the GoldenEye laser scene at a narrative level. It's Bond being tortured for
Goldfinger.
information. Or yeah, Goldfinger. Sorry. And then see, now I flipped it the other way. Um, Bond has a cool car with a gadget in it, although I will qualify that when we get there.
You're gonna
There
say the car's not
is.
cool?
We'll get there. We'll get there. Um, Bond's having no regard for his cover story, very much a thing. There's an underwater scene, you know. Um, uh, there's a lot of things that you look at and go, this is a Bond film, but it is doing what we saw when we looked at License to Kill, which is that they're trying to remix the formula into something that modern audiences appreciate. I argued, that License to Kill it made sense why late 80s that would be the direction to go with the Bond franchise. It just didn't succeed. And it wasn't anything to do with Dalton. It was primarily just because the script didn't know what to do with. Well, partially because I think we agreed Dalton didn't want to play into the inherent humor of the character to some level. Um, uh, this is doing something different, and arguably, this movie is a better version of what License to Kill tried to do.
Yes.
Um,
Um, Before we move into it, I do want to take a step back also. And do you know at least one or two of the other actresses that were considered for Stephanie Broadchest?
Absolutely not.
How
No,
how could I not bring up the cover name they tried to give Vesper? Come
that was
on.
so good. That was such a great. That was another note of like, okay, we recognize this is a thing, but we're gonna float right past it.
So I think I remember there's rumor that they approached Angelina Jolie.
Oh, that would have been terrible.
And the one I spoofly want to mention, because I think she was close in contention, was Miranda Richards.
Why does it ring a bell?
She should be the queen from Blackadder, and she did other stuff too, but I know her more from
Got it.
Blackadder.
Okay, yeah,
Is
that would have been
also
interesting.
and yeah, and then that Ava Green I think came later, and I think she actually turned down the role until she read the script.
Sure, because in 2004, 5, whatever, you're being approached by Bond girl. There's a very specific set of things that come with that. Um, and until you read the script, I would be like, yeah, I don't know. But again, like Ava Green narratively fills the role of the Bond girl. It is a absolutely different take on the Bond girl we've ever seen before. But she absolutely fills that. She absolutely fills that role. But I would even again take my hand here a bit. We're kind of in the movie at this point, but um, she also takes the place of Bond's wife because as we saw, there's this weird thread of Bond's wife being killed, being a weird narrative thread in the movies that kind of gets referenced but never done anything with. This is a way to kind of make that a little more solid. And so her being not married, but like here's someone that Bond had a long relationship with. She died. That changed him. but we actually can build on that as opposed to just making a throwaway line in random Bond films. So I so it's kind of a weird blending of two of those tropes, but they're still. I mean, she is in this point the colleague Bond girl as opposed to the antagonist Bond girl, who has a appropriate set of skills that Bond needs to finish the mission. She's not a computer programmer; she's a financier, but she still fills a similar role.
And I wanted to make sure that we mentioned Ava Green up top because Ava Green's performance, much like Craig's here, is phenomenal. And she is essentially almost like a co-lead for this movie after her character
Yes,
shows up.
yes, absolutely.
I think that's it.
Um,
We can jump into the movie if you want before we
okay,
start really diving into spoilers.
okay, yeah, yeah, because like I said, we're kind of talking about the movie now. Um, MI6 operative James Bond earns his license to kill and promotion to 00 status by assassinating the traitorous MI6 chief Dryden and his colleague in Prague. That's the cold open. So kind of just stop there because that's the whole plot that happens, right? Is he kills two people, he gets his 00 status,
But it's black and white, Eddie.
right? And specifically has really heavy film grain put onto it.
They're going for the film noir vibe, and it is an over the. All right, forgot to mention. I think we mentioned it for Goldeneye, but they brought back Martin Campbell to kick off this franchise here. How they brought in Martin Campbell to kick off the Goldeneye franchise with Brosnan, and
Oh,
Martin
okay,
Campbell killed it with Goldeneye, and he killed it here.
yeah. I mean, I'm joking about it being over the top, but I mean, you've got to establish immediately this is not your dad's James Bond, and this 5-minute sequence really does that. It's like it tells you he's not 00 yet. And that bathroom scene is brutal in a way that we have not seen previously in very many Bond films.
It also brings up a question, though. All right, in almost every single fight that Craig's Bond gets in, he barely wins.
Yep.
Comes out frequently very bloody and beaten and battered, which is a great visceral feel to it. But then it also makes you question either Bond's skill level or the opponent's skill level that he's fighting.
I think given that this movie, again, within 3 minutes establishes this is a Bond very early in his career, his reduced skill lands better. Um, I feel like later films continue to play with this trope and that it feels less good as the franchise goes on. But for this first movie, I'm a little more fine with it. My issue with it is because they're trying to go for the visual spectacle of the blunt instrument Bond, he becomes almost superheroic. Like he's shattering sinks during the fight. And it's like, porcelain's not that fragile, you know? I mean, like and the human skull is strong, but it's not that strong. So it's like I get the visual appeal of it. It's like, oh, this is a Bond fight scene I've never seen before. Um, but like the fight scene in the train of The Spy Who Loved Me was also very brutal, but didn't require exploding train cars or anything to make that fight work too, you know?
But we as an audience have evolved past that point. So I think we need the extra
Yeah,
visceral nature of it to have the same impact as the fight scene from The Spy Who Loved Me would have back then. Or at
maybe.
the other
That's fair.
hand, they were in a was that Prague they were in? They were somewhere
Yeah,
else. So the toilet could have been really old, Eddie, and barely hanging on. Like maybe a misshot stream could have shattered that toilet for all we know.
that's true.
And the
That's
same
true.
thing
We
for the
don't.
sink.
That's true. We don't know. It could have just been faulty porcelain, you know, well known to be a problem in Prague.
I, I did like the fact that for this film, Bond sort of quips with him in a very cold manner for the actual MI6 chief. He kills him, and the camera, for a brief moment, flashes to that dude's family to show you that
Mhm.
Bond is a cold blooded killer before it moves
Right.
on.
Yeah, no, it's a good shout. Because the guy's like, well, the second time, the second kill, and then Bond kills him, and then Bond goes, "Yes, I know." Um, we know that the second kill's easier. It's kind of what he's going for. Um, and let's contrast this with Dalton, right? Dalton got very obvious jokes and swallowed the humor of them, and we criticized that pretty consistently. It's like, these are funny lines, and you're trying to just evaporate the humor out of them. Craig's doing the opposite here. That's not really a joke, but the way he plays it off, there's a bit of a twinkle in there that you could already see a Bond who jokes with people as he kills them is on the horizon. So even though this is a gritty film where Bond doesn't have a bunch of one-liners, Craig is taking things that are almost one-liners and putting slight spin ons that are almost jokes. So that way, when we finally do the flip at the end, it feels earned in a weird way that you never expected a James Bond film would have to go through that journey, but it does.
And I think it's also an important note because we keep highlighting the visceral nature that the film has gone to. And all that visceralness needs to be undercut with something else to sort of bring you back
Mhm.
down and ground you in the movie. And that touch of humor does that. It's important. And I
Yep.
think that's why if we look at the different fight scenes, whenever we break them down, there's usually a little something right there towards the end that brings you back in so you're not overwhelmed by the sheer amount of violence that you're witnessing.
Right. Um, and that if we're cool, I'm gonna go into the opening sequence too, because that does kind of
Yeah.
flow into that. Um, Genuinely one of my favorite opening sequences of the franchise. Um, because it's one of the I haven't seen the '90s one, so I may be wrong, but it's one of the better CGI created opening sequences. It's almost entirely CGI. It's all themed around playing cards because it's Casino Royale, but all of them are Bond murdering people in different ways using playing cards as a theme.
Yeah. Are you going to say that he is Gambit now, Eddie? Is that where we're about to go?
No, no, but
All right. Bullseye.
also, this is the thing. When I first watched it, I hated "You Know My Name." I was like, "It's not a Bond song. It's terrible. Why'd they choose this?" 20 years later, it is the only Craig era theme song I can remember easily, is "You Know My Name." And every time I hear it, I start grooving to it. It's like, I don't know why. I don't know why I visually said, "This is not James Bond theme," because it so is. It is a pop song of the era where the lyrics are very roughly talking about an extremely high level version of what the movie's plot is. It absolutely is a James Bond theme in every sense.
Yeah.
I don't know why when I first saw it, I was like, no. Maybe because that was a man
Because
singing it. I don't know.
no, I think it's because it doesn't have Casino Royale in
Maybe
the
yeah, it's it.
song.
Yeah, it doesn't have the title in the song.
Because even if we go and we look at like Adele's version, when she does Skyfall, it literally sings
It says
Skyfall at you.
Skyfall. Yeah.
Goldfinger
Live and Let
sings
Die
Goldfinger
is
at you,
right. Live and Let Die's theme is Live and Let Die, you know.
or Thunderball. A lot of
Yep.
Tom Jones singing Thunderball at you.
Yeah. Right. So maybe that is it. I mean, it's simply as that. Um, but You Know My Name is a good song. I hate to say it, but it really is.
So I don't love this opening credit scene. It could be because like I think you were programmed part of it. A lot of us are programmed because if we hear the name of the song, that's how we associate it being a Bond theme song.
Right.
I think I've been programmed to like, where are all my scantily clad women that have to
Right. We're the
show
naked
here
women.
in this opening
Yeah.
scene? I don't want to see Craig kill people. I want to see Craig kill people for the next 2 hours.
Right. Right. That is it's something I also noticed too. And when I first watched it, I was like, "Yeah, where are the naked women?" And I was like, "That's a weird thing to." In
Yep.
2006, why is that a thing I need in my movies? You know, that's a weird
Yep.
thing to think. But it's true. It is very much the iconography of the franchise, and it is missing from this opening sequence. So I could see why a lot of people saw these first 5 minutes and said, "Nope, I hate this movie." You know?
And part of it is because you've been conditioned to expect it from the Bond films.
Yeah.
And so I understand if they're trying to break that conditioning, if they're going in a totally different direction. It does then strike me that as a person that's watched those the Bond films, that I kind of miss it. I don't
Right.
know why I
It's
miss it, other than I'm used to seeing it.
yeah. So that we're at a point of the franchise where it's like you're exactly right. Things that we as modern people are going, that's not okay. But we're still we're nostalgic from it because of this franchise. And so Bond is now at a very weird point in its life as a franchise, 90s, but particularly here, where it's like it's got to divest or reframe certain parts of its formula to work. And like I said, we talked about even Dalton Air was feeling it. They took some different steps, and we all kind of like, nah, it's not quite that. Um, but here we have more mixed reaction. Like I thought it was fine, you didn't really care for it. So I mean, like, but we're getting closer, right? You know, the field is narrowing. They're getting better at that mix. Maybe we'll see how the movie
And
goes.
much like Dalton, I'm going to say that the Craig era Bond is less about the sexuality of Bond and displaying that sex in the character. Like
Yes,
Dalton was very professional. I guess I'll do it because we're here and it gives me information. Craig is like even toned that down even more, which
yeah,
you could say it's harder to notice in this film because of like the love angle they're going for. That's more of like a Her Majesty's Secret Service thing, but it's not true. It's at different points. You can see it. I'm going to bring it up in a minute because you're about to go
right,
somewhere.
right. Yeah. So let's wait. I have some lots of it. We'll wait till we get there. When Vesper comes on, we'll have a lot like that. Anyway, in Uganda, Mr. Whites introduces Stephen Obano, commander of the Lord's Resistance Army, to the Chief, an Albanian private banker, to terrorists. Obano entrusts the Chief with $100 million to invest. Using knowledge of his upcoming terrorist attack on aerospace manufacturer Skyfleet, not Starfleet, the Chief sorted the company's stock. Meanwhile, in Madagascar, Bond destroys the Namutu embassy while capturing and then killing a bomb maker named Molika. In Molika's possessions, Bond finds a phone with a text that only reads ellipses.
He didn't find a phone. All right, I'm not going to go there yet. We can talk about the other part first, but then we're going to come back to parkour.
Right, right. Oh yeah, we'll talk about parkour. Um, so one of my retrospective complaints about this movie is, first of all, I don't know if Mr. White gets a passing reference in one of the texts much later in the film, so we don't have his name. You only really get his name by careful watching of the film. Um, you see him at the very beginning of the film, and as we'll see, we see him in the climax and at the very end. Which means if you're not paying close attention, like I was the first time movie, it's very much who the fuck is this guy and where did he come from? But he is here at the beginning, but it's such a blink and you miss it. It doesn't quite establish Mr. White really. It's just kind of here's the guy, introduces the other guy. We don't know in the context of the movie who this guy is or why he matters. And then we're left without him for so long. Now, granted, later movies pick up the Mr. White thread down the road. So from that perspective, it makes more sense. But just in the context of the movie, it's like, who the hell is this guy? Right?
So,
But we do,
Le
we'll do
Chiffre,
it. Yeah.
as a villain, what do you think of Le Chiffre?
Well, I mean, this is really, I don't know if it's the first film where Madsen plays a villain, but certainly it's the most iconic film where he gets cast as villains for a long time after this. Um, uh, and I am annoyed just because it is a continuing of a very unfortunate trends of Bond films, which is the guy with the medical problem is obviously the villain, right? He has a medical condition. I do appreciate that the movie does. We don't quite see it here; it's a bit later. The movie goes out of his way for the chief to explain, "Oh no, I have a medical condition. I'm weeping blood. It's nothing nefarious." Which does some distance to kind of undercut it, but still, the only guy with a visible disability is the villain of the film, so it doesn't excuse it.
Yeah.
It does like we recognize it's a problem, but we didn't actually solve it. It's like cool, thanks. Um, but in terms of as the Bond villain, as the trope that we have built up, he's a bit mediocre.
Yeah.
Honestly, he's not as bombastic as we have come to expect Bond films to be. Like, I would prefer the villain in License to Kill over Le Chiffre.
So I feel the same way. And then my thought that I've had later is the fact that if we're building up Bond, I guess we're also building up the expectations of what the villains will be too. Because
Right.
Lashif here has his own arc, which we'll go into in more detail,
Yeah.
but kind of how Bond has an arc, Lashif has an arc, which
Right.
we normally don't get for Bond villains. Like
True.
they're usually fully established. Like I have a criminal
Right.
empire. I am a super powerful person.
One thing I will say about Le Chiffre in this modern version is they have found a way to synthesize Bond villain as capitalist and Bond villain as national enemy into something that's rough, that is closer to a synthesis, right? Because Lashif is a banker to terrorists. It's the, oh, okay, so we're against him because he funds terrorism, but we also are against him because he's a filthy capitalist. And it's like, so he actually does kind of both Bond villain lanes into one villain, which is actually a neat touch.
Yeah. But that also makes him a middleman instead of being
Right.
like head of anything.
And that's
And
the problem, is because he's not really the Bond villain. Mr. White is the Bond villain, and we barely see him.
okay, when I was watching this film again, like this time, Lashif's love interest, whose name I don't remember from the film, bothered me because I know that actress. I know that actress. So I had to look her up. She is the third lead of a TV series called Banshee that came out in 2010. It's like
Oh,
a
wow.
gritty crime drama that I used to watch because it was great brutal fights. There's like lots of sex and other stuff in it.
Valenka. I had to look her up too. Valenka.
And I mentioned it because she was really good in that. In here, I think she's underutilized, but also Banshee is a show that I think forgot his name now, the guy that becomes Homelander on the map. So that's how I
Oh,
got to
okay.
become Homelander.
Okay. Yeah, no.
Anthony
Her
Starr.
role in this
Damn, I'm
her role in this movie is to have bangs over one eye. That is pretty much her entire role in this movie. And also to briefly betray the chief.
So that was it. I just remembered her specifically, and I was like, that was bothering me much how I couldn't believe that Minnie Driver was in that Bond
Yeah,
movie.
yeah.
I was like, what?
Okay, so yeah, so you could tell this movie
Parkour?
was made in 2006 because we spend way too much time with parkour. Way too much time.
No, we spent the perfect amount of time for parkour.
No, it's way too long.
That they needed that action scene. Okay, why do you think we spent too much time before I get on
Well, okay.
my soapbox?
So let me step back. Uh, it is too long upon a, this time, fifth or sixth watch for me. Right. So when I first watched this, it was not too long because it's doing two things. One, it was 2006 and parkour was the coolest fucking thing ever in 2006. I mean, so like
Parkour.
it's parkour. So I mean, like Bond following trends is something that we have unequivocally established throughout this run. It's like 1979, fucking the space shuttle is the coolest fucking thing ever. You know, parkour is the coolest fucking thing ever. So like that I can't fault the movie for doing that. And also, it does need space to establish that this version of Bond handles things differently than other versions of Bond that we have seen. So, like, we have to have the moments like he bursting through the drywall as opposed to climbing through a hole. This is not a suave, sophisticated Bond. This is a brutal, blunt Bond. I, on a multiple watch, feel like literally 10 minutes of action sequence might be a bit too much, but it is all good. There's no point where it's like, this is a bad action sequence. It's all fantastically shot and done. It's just, when I find myself rewatching it, I usually kind of like fast forward a bit through this part.
Oh, ever. So I love this scene for a multitude of reasons. The personal reason is I think Jill and I saw this movie together, and then we were playing Star Wars Dark Defiance. I was running the game, and Jill was playing a Jedi. And when she was doing some of the Jedi jumps, halfway during the session, it was like a long session, all this combat, and then like some of the plot stuff. And she broke out with like her own parkour line out of nowhere, and the whole table died laughing.
Yeah.
Jedi is doing parkour. So it was
Yeah.
great. But for the movie specifically, as you said, it shows the difference not only in Bond, but in the person Bond is chasing. Someone that actually knows the landscape, that is fully trained in doing this. I think the actor who's one of the founders of parkour too.
Yes, it was. Mhm.
And I think they put wires on him, but they digitally erased him. But that was it. Like everything else was literally this dude doing this.
And to be
Fucking
clear, those were
fantastic.
safety wires, not wires to help him with his movements. Those movements were all him.
Yes. And I think they had to put safety wires because it had to be legal, because in
Right.
case something happened,
It was
they didn't want to
mandated
be
by the
sued. Like,
union.
nope.
Yep. Yeah. Health and
Because I
safety
bet
on
he's
that.
like, I don't want wires. Don't need them. It's like,
Right.
yes. But it establishes. Go ahead.
I was just saying, just really quickly, and also this is to go back to our checklist of Bond tropes. This is the aerial scene. right?
Yes.
They're not in a plane, but they're on a crane, and the way they shoot that crane scene is very much like they would shoot an aerial scene in any other Bond films. This is the aerial scene checkbox of the Bond trope checklist.
And him doing that, those moves, fantastic. But also, as you said, demonstrates Bond more as a blunt instrument that uses
Mhm.
his physicality to get him through situations, like Kool-Aid manning through a wall. But at the same time, it shows you that Bond is a tactical thinker because he sees this dude getting ahead of him and going down everything else he can't do it. But then he uses that not crane, but something like to lower himself to the ground and putting
Yeah,
himself in different situations to offset his lack of skill. So it's showing you not
right,
only that, but he's also a great thinker.
right.
And it
Um,
ends. Go ahead, because
I was
I'm
just
about
saying,
to go to the end.
okay, go ahead and finish your thought.
And it ends with him showing also that he's a cold-blooded killer by killing the guy instead of having like MI6 go through legal arbitration to still get the dude a little bit later.
Right. Um, we also do establish because he is talking to another agent who is clearly a rookie in field operations, because he keeps touching his earpiece and Bond says, "Put your hand down." So like we established that he's not a new agent; he is new to being a double O, and that is an elite cadre of British agents. Um, but you're right. Is then I won't say undercut. We see his hot headedness when he is basically surrounded in an embassy, and he's like, "Fuck it, I'm just gonna kill this guy."
I wouldn't even call that hot-headedness. That was like a decision he made to show that we get a view of his values is what we get.
Fair. It is also topical in the sense that the early 2000s was a point where MI6 was coming under a lot of British scrutiny. Um, a lot of uh, misappropriations and problems of MI6 agents acting abroad were starting to come to light in the papers, and so this kind of thing of Bond making headlines as a result of his actions was something that was fairly topical at the time. So it's another way to kind of dig into that. This is people are excited and interested about now in 2006 components of the movie, and certainly leads to. We'll get to this part in a second when I'm dealing with it. But you're right in the sense that uh, Bond is aware that he's in an embassy. He's not foolish. Uh, whether he's aware of the camera is up for debate because we only see a single camera pointed at him and is behind him, but we have to assume he's at least somewhat aware that he's probably on camera.
Well, he's a fully trained MI6 agent. He would know that embassies have cameras all over them.
Right, right, right. So I agree with you that it's tactical, but also there is a level of, and it's funny because there's no spoken dialogue in this chunk, but it does feel like he's frustrated. Um, and we'll see that in a minute when we get to see him. His explanation is also very frustrated. Um, he has a very kind of "I killed the bad guy. What's the fucking problem?" vibe about him.
Well,
Side
let's
note,
go real.
also frustrated that the bomb maker is again physically disfigured and is "quote unquote" bad guy.
And we also get constantly reinforcing that this version of Bond enjoys the kill more almost anything else.
Yes, yes, he is. He's not even functionally an assassin. He is literally an assassin. He assassinates people for the British government. That's what he wants to do. And the issue is not well. Okay,
Yeah, let's move on before
we're
we.
look at the next section because I will talk about this a little bit more. MI6 Chief M criticizes Bond for causing an intentional incident, like we were just talking about, and ignoring her orders to take Malacca alive. Information on Malacca's phone leads Bond to Nassau in the Bahamas and corrupt Greek official Alex Dimitrios, who has hired Malacca to bomb Skyfleet's prototype airliner at the chief's request. After winning Dimitrios' vintage Aston Martin in a poker game and seducing his wife Solange, Bond pursues Dimitrios to Miami. Bond fights off an attack by Dimitrios and kills him. At the airport, Bond chases down the new bomber Dimitrios has hired and prevents the destruction of the Skyfleet airliner. With the Skyfleet stock secure, the chief loses Obano's money. Realizing that somebody has leaked the terrorist plot, the chief tortures Solange to death. So yeah, The reason why M is mad that Bond killed someone is not moral, it is political, which goes to the quote I gave, is that the fact that Bond did this and was caught on camera and the newspapers have this is a large part of her problem, and also ignoring her orders. So if the situation were different, we get the impression M would have no problem with Bond killing somebody. The fact that he killed him badly seems to be the bigger problem, which sets up an interesting dynamic.
Well, we already have an understanding that M is morally flexible because even before
Yes.
Bond assassinates a corrupt MI6 person, he says that M wouldn't mind if you're taking money on the side. It's the
Right.
fact that you're
That's true.
doing this.
Yep.
So
Selling secrets.
establishing M's character there, and then we're coming back to here too.
Mhm.
Ugh.
Right. Which is frankly the most interesting the M Bond relationship has been since License to Kill. You know, uh, Bond's and M's relationship has generally been M gives orders, Bond follows a certain percentage of those orders. The mission gets solved, and M forgives Bond. Now we're at a place where it's like Bond does, in a very abbreviated form, at a high level, what we expect Bond to do. Bond did a certain percentage of his orders, and Ben and M cracks down on him as like we're not used to that. We're not used to M criticizing Bond. It's like wait, that's not how this works. But her logic is makes sense partially because it is so analytical. Which again, that's one of my many points why I think she is very close to her Brosnan era interpretation because that was her conceit. It's like I'm a numbers person. I'm the statistics analyst, and so I'm going to approach this like an analytical perspective. She's still continuing that analytical approach. It's really her subordinate that seems to be the one that has a bit more of a morality to him. Even though I don't think I ever get his name throughout this whole thing.
I think they drop it once. It starts with a T. I don't remember what it is, but
Right,
that's.
Tyler maybe.
I,
I don't know.
I I think that's established. I'm glad you mentioned that because that's also another establishing point for Bond is that we don't have Moneypenny yet, and we don't
Yes.
have Q yet.
Yep.
And is this? I can't remember from the note perspective, but is this the part where Bond has already broken into M's apartment,
Yes.
and we
And so
get the even the chains in that he originally thought M was like a title passed down to everyone didn't know it was related to their name. So we're establishing that her first name starts with M, and I like that they pull it back so they don't tell you what it is.
right, and then she goes utter one more syllable, and I will have you killed. And it's kind of a joke, but also kind of not. It's like she's joking, but she might also have him killed, which I like. I like that ambiguity.
And even on to this point, so we keep having M telling us that Bond's a blunt instrument, which is true.
Right.
But then all that is constantly undercut that Bond, this version of Bond, is the best detective Bond we've seen throughout the entire series.
Absolutely, 100%. The closest we got is again License to Kill, where he did some detecting, kind of. That's when he genuinely is putting pieces together.
I think Lazenby did some detective work.
Fair, fair. But again, what I like about this is that I said before, like until this conversation, he's an assassin. M is the person that puts the qualifiers on. It's like a double O is a tactical assassin. You kill people when we need to in very specific circumstances. Um, you don't just murder people for the fuck of it. You don't murder people because it's inconvenient. You murder people at the behest of the government. And so that makes this whole relationship more interesting, is because we're used to a Bond who kills very casually with a quip, but also, let's be honest, he doesn't kill often throughout the course of the movies. I mean, okay, let me phrase that. I immediately, as soon as I said that, I realized, okay, he kills a bunch of faceless people in his movies, so that's not what I really meant. Um, um,
Are you saying that he doesn't kill a lot of named NPCs if we want to
yes,
break it down to role playing terms?
that's actually what I am saying, but I couldn't think of a better way of phrasing it. But yes, like people that we people that we give a shit about as opposed to just stock extras, right? It's like no, he doesn't kill very many of them.
Like
Um,
mooks go down left and right.
right. And more specifically, uh, um, we don't see him kill uh, uh, quietly. I should say. There's always a joke or a comment or something. He just straight up shoots this guy, and that's it. There's nothing else there. There's no emotion involved with it. I think that's the part that's maybe the most shocking of that scene. And M's like, that's not what we do. Yes, you kill people. You literally have a license to kill, but that's not everything that you're about.
Okay.
So then we get to this subplot.
I'm about to touch on the seduction scene. Is there something else you'd like to discuss before that?
No, that was pretty much where I was going to. So you go ahead.
We get an inverse first off of the Ursula Andrews scene of her coming out of the water with Craig coming out of the water.
Yes.
To seduce with that stunning look. And that goes back to the part of like Craig's physicality is one of the reasons they chose him for the action pieces, but it also one of the pieces that gives him that sort of Hollywood actor vibe to him that kind of goes from like, I'm gorgeous. I look like I'm a rat that's wet. And that's a great play that they do here. But he uses that to seduce the wife to get the information. And then specifically pointing out that this Craig is not interested that much in sex. He leaves her. He orders something for her and then just bolts and is gone to go to his mission so he can kill someone else.
Yes. Side note, it was amusing that he wins the exact car that he gets in Goldfinger, right? It's the Aston Martin. So it's like, yes, we know, but it's a kind of a yes, we get it moment, but also I like it in the sense because it's no, we haven't forgotten what James Bond's about. Here's the Aston Martin. Trust us. We know it feels like we know we're going with this. Just let us follow us on this. But here's a bit to show you that we do know what Bond's all about. So I actually like that bit. And then frankly, the section of the life it feels very traditional Bond until that moment where it's like, yeah, is that for two? No, just for one. And then fucking leaves while she's in the shower. And it's like, wait, no, where are you going? This is the part where you bang the wife again. What are you doing, Bond? But it's because we've always known that women are tools for Bond's mission. This is the most explicit that has ever been for me.
I'm thinking of the Sean Connery one when he became, and I use figure quotes, an Asian person, and that has a lot of that in it too.
Well, okay, yes, but that movie was,
or the Roger Moore one when God, I forgot the psychic's name. He uses her, so there's lots of it in it, but they have a completion factor that Craig here does not have.
Right. And also, Craig puts a bit of irritation into it. I think that more never had. More always like, of course, I would love to stay, darling, but I have to go murder somebody. Kind of vibe. Where Daniel Craig is like, God, I'm so fucking done with this. I want to go back to killing people. He seems almost annoyed by the fact that he had to do that, which is very different than we've seen before.
And Dalton's, I'm gonna talk about it. Just blah.
Yeah. But I mean, just in the midst of this, there's another piece that I think plays to it can read his hot head, it can read his tactical thing. Is when he's infiltrating the place. He's wearing a white shirt, and then one of the people that mistakes him for a parking valet, and throws him the keys, and he immediately, to his credit, yes sir, sorry sir, goes through, and then to cause distraction to sneak in, slams the car into the other car, set off all the alarms, and tactically doing that certainly causes distraction. He can walk right in because no one's going to expect someone who just slammed the car in to do it. But this guy thinks he's a valet, so he's going to start interrogating the staff, not knowing Bond doesn't work for them. But also does, for me, paint a picture of a guy who's still a little bit of a hothead. There could have been different ways to get that distraction as opposed to just ramming a car into other cars, right? But it could play either way, and that's what I like about this. There is an ambiguity about how much of Bond is tactical and how much of it is emotion. We don't actually know.
I still don't see the hot-headedness for him, but given the fact that he takes usually the most direct route to getting to solutions that he can.
Right.
Which loses the hot-headed, like, anger piece of it that I would envision for that. So I think we're seeing the same thing just from different vantage points.
Well, that's my point is that, we're both seeing different things, but neither of us are going, "No, your interpretation's wrong." It's there is a layer here. There's a nuance here that we've never really seen in Bond before. Bond is not again, well, I take it back. Lazenby, which we didn't cover, and a little bit of Dalton, we have seen attempts at layers, right? But there's some interesting how much of this guy is just ruthless assassin, how much this guy is, I'm actually following the mission. It's a little vague, and the fact that we're both getting different interpretations from it is actually really cool to me. I like that. Um, but then
I
he goes
wanna
to
visit
Miami. Go
I
ahead.
wanna visit the museum, by the
Yeah,
way, that he goes to that's
Invisible
that
Bodies.
looks
Remember when
incredible.
Invisible Body was the coolest thing ever in 2006? Movie is so 2006. But you were saying,
No, I just really love that museum and, like, the death scene in there. The quiet death
yes.
scene, being able to murder someone and have no one notice.
Hmm. Um, and I dig it because like a band Bond is just efficient here. He doesn't make a joke. He just kind of gets on with the job and kills the guy. It's in self defense, you know. So there's that going for him. But again, he doesn't make a joke. He just does it. So it's the but what we've established. This is a very let's go with efficient Bond, ruthless. I think it's fair to call him ruthless too. Honestly, Mhm.
Ruthless. Pierce was efficient. Craig is ruthless.
Yeah, yeah, that's actually a good distinction. Um, then we get the airport scene. Um, as a note, uh, during the airport security, there's a guy who's being patted down way off on the right side of the screen. It's Richard Branson, who is the leader of the Virgin Group. So he does
Hmm.
Virgin Wireless, Virgin Airlines, multi-millionaire, probably billionaire at this point in time. Just had a cameo in a Bond film because he wanted to be in one, and they had him pat him down. I'm like, that's probably the best way you could have done that.
Come on. If I could have had money to get a cameo in a Bond movie, I'd do it too.
Right. And to your point about him being detective, leads to actually one of my favorite underrated jokes in the movie is when Bond's like calling up, and I said, "Come on, come on, come on, come on! I need you to say, come on, come on, come on, come on." Finally, gets him on the phone. He looks at the phone, realizes ellipsis is the keypad code. He goes, "I'll call you back," and hangs up on her, which just shows that Bond does not give a fuck about anybody else's time, which I love.
Oh, ridiculousness.
Right. But I mean, honestly, this whole airport scene is straight up again the Bond checkbox, the huge bombastic action scene. This is a big one, right?
So this is what I fast forwarded through.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I love this scene. It is now. Granted, part of that is because it is the closest Bond has to his gadget moment, which is where we
Yeah.
start getting into the qualifiers, right? Bond does something clever with technology. Traditionally, this is a pre-prepared gadget. He doesn't have one. He uses somebody else's gadget that they happen to have on them to do it. So there's a little keychain that's actually a bomb. And Bond uses that in a clever way that was not previously established. That is a moment that we usually have with his gadgets. He's doing it with something else, so it's still kind of there.
Yeah.
And I just love the idea of like we keep seeing the blinking little light, and then realize, oh shit, it's on his belt. It is a neat touch.
People didn't think it was a neat touch when Batman put a bomb in somebody's pants and blew him up.
Yeah, well, they're wrong. Just like they're wrong about penguins with bombs. Again, bombs are great. I will not die on this hill. I will become mildly injured on this hill, maybe. Um, but no, I love this, and also I personally kind of love that all of this is to fuck up someone's stock speculation, right? There's no like this plane is gonna like solve world hunger or there's secret plans. I'm like, no, it's just like this guy's gonna lose a shit ton of money because this plane was supposed to blow up.
Before you move on to the next beat,
Mhm.
Eddie, this movie is named Casino Royale. Has the movie up to now had anything to do with the fucking book other than the title?
No. Everything up to this point has been completely invented.
We're like what, an hour, a little over an hour into this movie now?
45 minutes.
Okay.
I did check this. Because to the movie's credit, the next chunk we're gonna do, which is all the Casino Royale stuff, is like 35 minutes, and then a lot of that is very roughly book accurate. And it spends quite a long time in the casino. But yes, up to this point has been complete fabrication.
So I just wanted to point that out because that they spent 45 minutes establishing like what their new Bond is, their new
Yes.
setting, and everything else before making the change over to the actual book, which seems to be a ballsy move to go from a detective blunt instrument to boom, super proficient gambler.
Right. And well, actually, well, since I'm not quite there yet, I do want to let's talk about it now real quick. Um, it's something that when I first saw it, I thought was a bit of tonal whiplash. Having watched it several times now, I've grown to like it a lot more because if you jump more or less to the Casino Royale stuff that we're about to get into, Bond's in a tuxedo, he's being super cool at a casino. Without this context, it's like, of course Bond's gonna win. There's no stakes. Because we've seen all of this stuff of this guy who probably can barely play cards as far as we can tell. Turns out he's actually good at poker, but that's a throwaway line. Um, there's actually stakes of like, can he pull this off? Because I don't know if this Bond can do it. So it does help to build actual emotional stakes on this because otherwise 30 years of Bond going, as soon as you get tuxedos on, he's a casino, you're basically done because we know he's perfect in the environment. So I do like that, but I completely agree with you. That could have gone very badly if they had
Yeah.
gone for a different film.
And but you're pointing out that you were after multiple viewings. So I'm assuming
True.
tens of
Yeah.
viewings for you to come to this point. I have
Well, I mean,
seen this
6 or 7.
Bond
Yeah.
Bond movie now, counting this time, 3 times.
Right. And I will argue. The first time I watched it, I was like, "Just feels like two Bond movies." My first kind of gut reaction to it. So let's
And
go. Let's go. Oh,
when
go
they're
ahead.
making this transition, you're about to get into it. I just want to touch on the fact that we get a more another glimpse at how analytical that M is because she says Bond says, "You knew I was going to go after him anyway," and she just sort of says yes.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so to recoup his client's money, the chief organizes a Texas Hold'em tournament at Casino Royale in Montenegro. MI6 enters Bond, the agency's best poker player, mentioned in passing, in the tournament, believing a defeat will force the chief to seek asylum with the British government in exchange for information on his clients. Bond is paired with Vesper Lind, a British Treasury agent overseeing the $10 million buy-in. They meet their contact, French Secret Service agent Rene Mathis, in Montenegro. Obano, furious his money was lost, threatens the chief, but allows him to continue playing to win back the money. Obano and his bodyguard attack Bond, who kill them both. Bond loses the $10 million stake after the chief is tipped off about his own tell. Vesper refuses to authorize an additional $5 million for Bond to continue, but fellow player and CIA agent Felix Leiter stakes Bond the money in exchange for letting the CIA arrest the chief. The chief's lover, Valenka, poisons Bond drinks, but Vesper rescues him. Bond returns to the game and wins the tournament. Um, so a lot happens, but it's also quite a long chunk of the movie. And
Yeah.
to be honest, it doesn't feel like a long chunk of the movie. It's very well paced. So it's one of those things like when you watch it several times, like, oh, this is a quarter of the film.
So this is where I get to make my joke though about when they introduced Vesper and them going undercover as Stephanie Broadchest,
Yes.
and he was like something beach, which is
Yes.
ah oh
He's reading off the cover sheets, and he's like, "And you're somebody broadcast," and she's like, "I am not." He told me, "You have to trust me. That's what the paper says," which is a great little moment. Um, and that's something certainly Vesper and Bonds. We have talked before about the sexual chemistry between, or lack thereof, between whoever's playing Bond and the titular Bond girl, or whoever's the woman he's choosing at the moment, has been all over the scale. This has been one of the few times of beyond Diana Riggs in Her Majesty's Secret Service, of genuine romantic chemistry between two actors. Because these two They hate each other at the start of this movie. They do not like each other. And even then, even when they are being very polite, very brittle, and very sarcastic to each other, you're still going, but I do kind of want to see them get together. So it's really good.
Well, because it starts off with that scene between just the two of them where they're trying to like figure each other out.
Mhm.
And Bond sort of tries to break down Vesper, then she breaks down Bond based on some of the intelligence that he gave her at the same time. So it's a nice dynamic, which is how we
Right.
know that Bond is like an orphan now, stuff like that.
Yes. And to your point, very firmly establishes that Vesper is functionally co-lead in this movie, even though she's introduced again 45 minutes into the movie, 50 minutes almost into the movie, almost halfway through. Side note: this is the second longest Bond film ever, so there's a lot of movie.
And we get the best Felix of the franchise.
Yes. Oh my god, I love this Felix Leiter. Hands down, my favorite Leiter of the whole franchise.
Jeffrey Wright, as usual, kills it in pretty much any role that he's in.
Amazing. And also, because this is an origin film now, it was something I didn't know I needed. It makes sense why Leitner goes to bat for Bond so often. Because by taking a gamble on Bond, pun intended, um, he ends up getting a huge win for the CIA. It doesn't go well for him, but as far as the CIA is concerned, he tried to capture Lashif. So Bond kept to his word, and ultimately, he got what he wanted. And again, the fucking amazing line because I love how he pitches Leitner because Leitner's not funny, but also gives the how Americans work in Bond films really well. Just by the line when Bond's like, "What do you want? What happens? What do you do with the winnings?" And then he goes, "Does it look like we need the money?" I'm like, "That is perfect joke, perfect American in a Bond film. No notes, love it."
Like that entire gambling table looked like a bunch of fun, just from
Yeah,
like the different characters they had established, which is
honestly,
beautiful having seen. Which is beautiful having when I went back and I watched Doctor No to look at that gambling table, just like a whole bunch of white folks to come here to see what actual gamblers internationally would look like.
yeah, and honestly, easily half that table could have been a Bond villain in their own movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just visually and how they because there's enough room for them to have a bit of personality at the table. Um, and but even though very few of them have lines, you get a little bit of character out of them. And you're right, like it felt like a truly international table, which was amazing.
Loved it.
Uh, and also to the point about the gambling, a lot of we actually have not seen very many gambling scenes in our specific selection of Bond films. But so I'm going by off of memory of what I've seen of the Bond films. A lot of the when there's a gambling contest, we saw a little bit this in Goldfinger again. All Bond films are in competition with Goldfinger, but ultimately those gambling scenes are Bond and one other person, and they are head to head. Because this is a poker table, there are other people at the table. Um, those people are clearly not going to win, but you do get the sense that if they were not in a Bond film, they probably would have had a chance.
My my question is, do you remember in the book or not? Because I'm betting in the book they weren't playing poker, were they? Were they
Well, they
playing
certainly
some
weren't
other
because
game?
Texas Hold'em was not invented in the 60s
Yeah,
or 50s.
that's what I
So
thought. So that's a little modernization piece. So it's nice.
I
I liked it quite a bit.
believe they're playing baccarat in the book.
My favorite part, though, Eddie, because I talked about it when we watched Goldfinger, is they had someone that came in and they broke down like how the gold piece of that aspect of movie
Mhm.
works. Very important to know. And here you have Mathis explaining to us, the audience, about the tale and everything else in detail. Because he's not talking to Vesper. He's
One of
just
my one of my favorite slash most annoying parts of the film is him going, "There's 115 million in the pot." Yes, we know there's a lot of money in the pot, Mathis. We don't care. There's a huge stack of chips. There's 125 million. Shut up, Mathis.
but he has to tell us
But he has
the
to.
audience
Yes,
because
yes.
some of us are dumb Americans and we may not know how it works. And he has explained it to us so we can stay with the momentum of the film.
Right, no, it's again, it's the I love it because you absolutely as a person analyzing these films, like, I know why this is here, it makes perfect sense, he is the best person to do it, there's no other way I could have changed this, but it's also so much like I feel like he's like the announcer of a golf television or sorry, of a poker television show, it's like, "Oh, that's a flop. Oh, what's he gonna do here?" It's just like, "Shut up,
I
Kevin."
want that actor to go to every single major poker game and like do it and announce it, and then I would watch it because that is how much I loved it. Oh, it was so awesome and horrible at once.
Right.
Do you want to get to the fight scene, the
No, not
real
yet, no.
crux of what we're dancing around?
Not yet. I forgot to mention because this is going to be important in a minute here. We did forget that the third time, right when M's like, "Hey, by the way, you're the best poker player." This is the third time that M has had to explain Bond how his fucking job works, and she starts by straight up lowjacking him by putting a fucking transmitter into his arm. And she's like, "Come over here. What? Put your hand in there. Okay, why? Pow! This tells you where I'm at all times because I cannot trust you to do your goddamn job."
Funny
um,
enough, though, in the
mhm.
army before you were deployed, they have big needle guns like that where they'd line up all the soldiers and they'd stab them in the arm just like that with all their vaccines.
Really, really,
That's back when I was in. It's probably different
that's
now, but
terrifying.
yeah,
I
it
don't.
hurts, and if they mess up too, it's not a pretty sight.
Yeah. No, no, thank you.
And I want you to know there are like hundreds of soldiers in line. They're just going, "Pshoo, pshoo, pshoo."
Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of army stories. Where
Fight
would you
scene.
like to
Yep.
go? Are we going to go to the fight scene finally? The big bit.
Yes. Honestly, the staircase fight scene is I feel like one of the more underrated scenes in this movie. It is not the best action scene, but it is really, really good, and I think it gets lost because of the other more bombastic action scenes.
What? Why do they have machetes, Eddie?
Because machetes are cool, Chris.
Like, and if I was like an evil warlord crime person, Eddie, I wouldn't go to threaten the accountant. I would have minions that would do that.
Well, we have to bring him into the movie at this point. You see.
I Why? So I could be killed? I wouldn't do that. That's why I have minions and lieutenants that I send off to do that while I sit in my secret villain lair.
Okay, I completely agree with you in the sense that from a plot perspective, we run into one of the handful of mismatches between the Bond formula and what they're trying to do with this movie. Because if this was pure Bond formula, the sub boss showing up to threaten a minion to get conveniently killed is like that's just what happens in Bond films, right? But so much of this movie is built up to having a nice steady bit of logic to why things happen. So when this happens, it's like, okay, this happens in a Bond film. So again, check out the checklist. But also, you're right. It's like, but wait, what? What? Obano clearly has an entire army of people he could have sent to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And you could make a very mild argument for he's so angry he lost all of his money because he was very clear at the very end of the movie. It's like going, "My money is safe." Oh yeah, your money's perfectly safe. And his money was not safe. And so he's angry about it. But again, to fly all the way to Montenegro with a machete seems a bit much.
then to not do anything because he threatens to cut off Falenka. Is that the name
But
that you
like,
said she
yeah,
was?
mhm,
Cut off her arm. Doesn't do it. Some idle threats. That's not what you as a boss do. That's what you have
right,
grunts do.
right. I mean, I did like the bit of him going, not even a word of complaints. You should think about that. So like, it's an interesting touch of trying to give some. We talked about this before. Lashif actually has an arc, which is something we've never seen really in a Bond film before. Well, maybe Goldfinger. Goldfinger kind of sort of has an arc, but not the way Lashif does. So it's like, oh, we're building some character for Lashif here, but it is all in service for let's get to the point where Bond gets to beat these guys up, right? It's so clearly setting up the scene.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you that it's like this is clumsy, but I do genuinely like the staircase fight scene. It's really
It
good.
is I think it's a
Uh,
great fight scene because they're coming out with their machetes. I don't know what their machetes, but then you get all that action scene and him trying to keep Vesper safe at the same time, who's trying to
mhm.
escape. He can't pull a gun because he's like in the back quarters. They get rid of it, and then you get all those great action beats.
Right, and it's all happening they're literally fighting down the stairs while Vesper's trying to run down the stairs, so, like, she's barely ahead of the fight itself. So it's extremely well choreographed. That's one of the reasons why I like it. And also I've developed because Bond's action scenes are just so epic and large. Sometimes the more contained Bond action scenes can stand out as a result. And so, yeah, no, I really dig this, and also partially because it sets up Vesper has been ideologically opposed to Bond for a lot of this, and now she's seeing the reality of the kind of job he does, and it briefly breaks her as a result. So it's like again, how I get here is fucking nonsense, but what comes out of it is great because Vesper genuinely shaken by this, and Bond offers her comfort and does not try to take advantage of her. Like in so many of the Bond films, that would have been and she leans over and kisses him, and that leads to a sex scene, and it just doesn't. He just holds her in the shower, and that's it.
Well, from my understanding, one of the original beats is that originally she was supposed to have been naked, and Craig was like, "No, that's not what a person would do. She
Mhm.
would be in there in her clothes and everything else from like the emotional thing." And they left the clothes on, which I think works
That's
better for
cool.
that scene.
That's cool. That's cool for Greg. Um, and so it's we have this a quick arc with Vesper specifically because at the very beginning, he makes a side comment of like, "You're not my type," and she's like, What? Intelligent?" And he goes, "No, single." And it's like, Jesus, fuck, you're a bastard. And then we get this scene where he's genuinely offering her support. There's nothing in the. I mean, yes, keeping her on side to potentially offer the buy-in could be a reason why he's doing this. But it doesn't feel that way. It feels like he's just offering a moment of support because she's his partner in this, but she wasn't. She's here to fucking watch the money, right? That's not what her part of the job. So you start to see him not soften. That's not quite the right word, but certainly he's like, no, there's an emotional core there that's not completely gone.
And it was nice the fact that she is essentially like a treasury agent person and works in accounts and not a field agent because then we didn't have that awkwardness of her having been a field agent and running away or her trying to fight
Right.
and then being easily defeated by the bad guy that we saw in the Moore era when that happened.
No, that's actually a really good point because this is a Bond girl who James absolutely saves, but at no point in time is she actually diminished as a character as a result. Particularly because afterwards, he loses $10 million and she goes, "No, I'm not giving you more money." She still, even after all that happens, she still stands her ground. So, like, that is a good way to progress that. It's like, yes, in terms of violence, you're absolutely in charge of this. I'm not in any way, shape, or form able to cope with that, but this is my area. And regardless of what you did, the answer is still no, because I'm not going to fund even more terrorism.
Oh, oh. And then even after Bond goes and essentially saves Lashif and Flanka, she poisons him. Boom.
Because they're assholes. And then the car. So he has a car, which was shipped there. So we have no actual Q scene in this movie. One of the many parts of the checklist don't show up in this film. Just when he gets to Montenegro, he gets an envelope with a key in it, and the car's in a parking lot. And then we briefly see that the top half of the glove compartment has defibrillator and some injections for some reason, and the bottom half is where his gun is. That is the extent of the car gadgets in this entire film. It's weak.
It is an origin movie, Eddie. We've established that. That
Sure,
is high
sure,
tech for an origin movie.
right. Um, I, I, I I've said before throughout all of this, like going, we could check off the trope, but certainly this is the most check boxiest of the checks we have done. It is yes, there's defibrillator in the car. That is officially, technically speaking, a gadget. Okay, but it does work. It does keep him alive. And in terms of the plot critical gadget that makes no fucking sense except for this exact moment thing certainly does get checked off.
It Vesper has to come in and have it work.
Well,
And Vesper
right,
saves
yes.
Bond.
Yes. Yeah, which is good. And to actually, thank you for bringing it up because that's the next piece. Bond's humor starts to come to the fore more in that moment because he is saved from death and goes, "Cool, let's play poker." You know, and she's like, "You need to be in hospital," and he's like, "No, I'm good. I, I'm fine." Um, Again, it's not quite a joke, but the way he plays it is genuinely funny. And so it's like you could see Bond uses humor to cope with stress. And it's like, now I understand where the Bond quips come from. 30 years later, we now have explanation for this propensity of his. It's like, I like that. I like knowing that about him now.
Yeah, and then when he sort of plops down the table and it's like, all right, let's do this. And
Oh,
stares at
yeah.
him, and they both
That
and it's
last hand
both
nearly
look,
killed
you
me.
tried to kill me, and I'm still here.
That last hand nearly killed me. And I was just, and the look of fucking fury on the Chief's face. It was like, oh, well done. Perfect. Perfect. And again, it's like, it is written like a of a Dalton era situation delivered like Pierce Brosnan. It was the perfect synthesis of those two parts of the Bond franchise.
And that's why it works.
Yep, completely agree. Um, so Bond, of course, wins the tournament. Um, we already talked about Leitner being awesome. Anything else about this Casino Royale chunk?
No, this is like a great chunk. It has a lot of interactions and things like that, which I think they also brought in another writer that helped reshape some of the relationships and everything else here that they didn't use as much for the Brosnan era,
Right.
which they
Oh,
should have.
I forgot to mention. Another part of the a lot of people criticize about this movie, which I did get mad about, but I've since softened on, is during the Casino Royale film, he asks for a martini, and the guy asks, shaking his shirt, "Does it look like I give a damn?" And when I first heard it, I was like, "Ugh, I don't like that." Right? As a Bond, fan, I was like, "No, that's not good." I've softened on it partially because I think a lot of people forget the context. Is right after that, he invents a whole new drink that everyone loves. Right?
Yeah.
So him being an
It's
alcohol connoisseur is relevant. It's just in that moment he's so frustrated that that's not the question. He doesn't have the bandwidth to answer that question.
I'm trying to remember the placement, but that was either like right after the stairwell fight or something
Yes,
else. There's a moment where that was a thing.
it was right after he. It was right after. No, it was right after he was told he wouldn't get to that 5 million.
Yeah.
He's grabbing
So
the knife. Right.
that is
So he's
so ugh.
yeah. But like again, like nerds being nerds, it's like no, that's not a brain bond. I don't like that. But again, that's not what this movie's trying to do. It's like he's not quite there yet. Um, and the fact that he invented the Vesper drink, it's like he's still an alcohol snob. He's just expressing it differently right now. All right, let's move on. It's the last chunk of the film. Lashif kidnaps Vesper to trap Bond and takes them to an abandoned ship. He tortures Bond to reveal the password to the bank account holding his winnings, but Bond resists. Mr. White bursts in and kills Lashif, but spares Bond and Vesper. Bond awakens in hospital and recovers with Vesper at his side. He has Mathis arrested, believing that he had tipped off Lashif. Bond falls in love with Vesper and resigns from MI6, and the couple sail to Venice. When M reveals that his winnings were never transferred to the British Treasury, Bond realizes that Vesper has betrayed him. He tracks her down to the exchange of the money, where gunmen spot him and take her captive inside of a gutted Venetian palace undergoing restoration and supported by large flotation devices. Bond destroys flotation devices, causing the place to lurch and sink into the Grand Canal, and kills the shooters. Vesper is trapped in an antique elevator cage as it submerges. Bond dives into the canal to rescue her, but she locks herself in to prevent him. Bond later attempts to resuscitate her, but fails, and Mr. White escapes the money. M informs Bond, who has returned to service, and the organization behind the chief threatens to kill Vesper's lover until she becomes a double agent. When Bond denounces Vesper as a traitor, M realizes that she likely made a deal with White by trading the winnings for Bond's life. Realizing Vesper left her phone to help him, Bond checks the contacts and locates Mr. White in an estate in Lake Como. He shoots White in the leg and introduces himself at the very last line of the film. The name's Bond, James Bond. So,
That kidnapping scene and leaving her body in the road. Whew.
yes. Um, actually from the book, believe it or not. Um, not the multi-car flip, which by the way, we get a car chase, check off the list. It's very brief, and then that wreck is spectacular, right? It's almost, I hate to say beautiful about a car being destroyed, but it really does. It's genuinely well shot and well done. Like it just flips and flips and flips, and it takes just a bit too long to resolve. So it's like surely Bond is fucking dead, right? But it because again, talking about spectacle, it's 2006 now. You have to go a little bigger, a little more epic now, and so you just need to really show that car has just been rat fucked. But it's so good.
I think I saw in some feature somewhere they originally tried like ramps and everything else to get as many rotations of the car as they did.
Mm.
Oof, beautiful. It's
I
a better
do,
way to
I do.
destroy the car than what Goldfinger was.
Yeah, yeah, right. It again, like, what would you go figure but bigger, right? It's there's definitely certainly a vibe there, but that sudden shock of seeing her on the road is something we're not expecting to see in a Bond style car chase, and so it's like, oh shit, you know. So even the audience is like, we're used to a certain formula, and the formula goes to a certain point, then shifts. The whole movie's been doing that. It's like, here's the formula, we're gonna change it. Here's the formula, we're gonna change it, and that's like the most visual, obvious shock. And it even on rewatching it multiple times, I still get like kinda a bit caught up. Oh, you know, it's great.
And do Lashif tries to steal Bond's greatest weapon, Eddie, is
I
what we get
know.
next.
His magical penis.
A joke I can't make, it looks like in the Craig era. I'm pretty sad about that, actually.
Well, this is why, because the magical penis got crushed. So like, you know, he has to find new tactics now.
Is there any way to recover from that? Or is this
I
showing that James Bond has Wolverine-like regeneration?
I mean, again, we're there's some superhero DNA in this, which is interesting because it's 2 years before the MCU, but we have to figure like superhero movies were big before the MCU, right? So this is very kind of the X-Men were still a huge movie franchise at this point in time. So there's some of that DNA in here. It's just a bit heightened, right? Like Bond, I mean, again, we kind of glossed over this, but Bond had a heart attack and nearly died and goes back to play poker and keeps drinking, I will point out.
Well, the alcohol burns out the poison, Eddie, if you
Is
keep
that how that
putting it
works? I didn't
in.
know. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's medically proven.
Right. Um, also, again, like like even the torture itself, this is all straight out of the book. So like this chunk is actually reasonably accurate to the book. Vesper is invented, but like no, Vesper has a different role, I should say. Um, but like this chunk of the movie is still pretty accurate. Like it is Lashif does grab Bond, torture him in this exact way. Um, Bond is not nearly as flippant, but again, he's making jokes here because that's how he deals with stress. But again, the way Craig plays it is like, you know, he's talking about scratching his balls. And it's like, I'm going to tell people you scratched my balls. And then switches to, because I will never tell you. And you will have to kill me. And then your bosses will carve you up. And it's just like, whoa, wait a second. How did we get here? But like, we now see like, this is just another tool for Bond. The humor is just another tool in his toolbox.
But then you get Lashif's brutal reality for Bond, though, is that it doesn't matter if I kill you or not because MI6 wants me, so they'll take me and still protect me from those people.
Right. Right. And so it's important because we're continually pitting Bond specifically against M. MI6 is kind of larger, but really it's M, right? And so Bond's very tense relationship with M, so that when he does a bit later on resign, it weirdly feels earned. It's something like Bond's not going to resign from MI6. It's James Bond. We're just going to come back. But like in that moment, it's like no, that actually logically tracks because he wanted to kill the chief and he knew that the chief was going to get just immunity.
How many times has this motherfucker resigned from MI6? This is like his maiden mission as a double O, and he's already resigning. Eddie, it is now unreasonable that this keeps happening.
Sure. But my point is that his resignation here feels way more earned than even in License to Kill. License to Kill basically came down to my friend died. No, you have to go to this mission. Well, fuck you, I'm quitting. Right? This is like, no, seriously. I have tried to play within your sandbox. It's just not working. I'm gonna go sleep with my hot girlfriend. Bye.
I think it's almost like every other film Bond is running from MI6. So at that point in time, is it the organization or is it the agent that's not working?
Could both. Can both. We wish you well in your future endeavors, James Bond.
It's it's like Spider-Man. Every other issue, I'm giving up the mask. That
Right.
mm,
Everyone knows who I am, except when they don't.
that bothered
Um,
me, on the rewatch consistent, especially now since we've like in this like Bond run of noticing that keeps happening.
right. Fair. I liked it. I liked it more than I liked Vesper's betrayal. Let's be honest. It feels like it comes out of nowhere. Even when we're watching, it's like it still feels like it comes out of nowhere.
I don't know. I think it was seated with the necklace that they had on, and then like her not wearing the necklace. It's sort of
Sure, but that
all
was
there.
but you have to watch the movie again to see that arc, right?
I saw it the first time, but it's also I think part of it is how they see the Mr. White piece at the beginning. It's there, but
Sure.
it's not highlighted. And for the necklace, they specifically highlighted. He calls it out. He tells you what it is, and she's not married. And they build her relationship into it, so they're seeding all these pieces for you to see it to give her like some motivation for it.
No, that I mean that's fair, but again, like that's something that uh, maybe in my head it's like it. There's just a few too many moving pieces, I think, because again, the Mr. White thing. This is the first time he's the guy who sets up Lashif. Then Lashif makes a couple of vague references to an organization. This guy comes in, murders everybody, leaves Bond and her alive. The first time I watched it, it wasn't until like about a minute or two before her actual betrayal. I was like, wait a minute, we never just saw her being tortured. You know, we just heard her screaming. And then I saw betrayal. I was like, oh, okay. So like at the moment, I felt like, okay, I was smart. I noticed that just ahead of the movie. So that's me being smart. Um, but it does involve a lot of M explaining the plot in retrospect to Bond.
So the thing is, though, Lashif had to have been getting ready to torture her because otherwise they wouldn't have dropped her in front of Bond's car. So it's her deal with Mr. White that essentially saved the two of them. So Lashif was going to torture and kill her.
Right. Right. Um, that's just an interesting point. So
Because Eddie, if you work for me and if I suddenly drop you tied in front of an oncoming vehicle, you can assume that maybe we're not on the same team.
no, 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 no. Right. No, no. I mean, that part I'm agreeing with. I paused because okay, so we have to assume therefore the deal happened between the car wrecking and James Bond's torture,
Yes,
based on what. So like when he was unconscious, she cut a deal.
essentially.
Um, Mr. White realizing he has not gotten the money retroactively comes to kill Lashif. She is working for Mr. White. So that's why he keeps her alive. And Bond is the person who has the code. That's why he keeps him alive to try to get the money.
So I think that I think that she tipped off Lashif about Bond and the tracker and everything else. And Lashif was still going to torture and kill her if he didn't get the information. But she's also working for White, who tracks her down. I think that she cut the deal with White, who kills Lashif and spares her and Bond. Because
Right.
White kills everyone else there.
The problem I've always had with the chunk of the movie ultimately stems down to Lashif's line. It turns out your friend Mathis is my friend Mathis.
That's a given. Like Mathis would know people everywhere.
Right. But the point is that Bond's supposed to think that Mathis is the traitor. It turns out Mathis isn't the traitor. In fact, spoiler, Mathis comes back in a later Bond film.
Well, for a bit.
Um, couple of movies actually. I think he's doing quite a few of them. Now that I think about it.
Mm, mm.
Well, it's been a minute. Anyway,
I think he
point is,
comes back for a bit, and then much like most of Bond's friends,
Okay, spoiler for a future Bond film, Mathis dies, but he dies he doesn't die in this movie. Um, but so Mathis didn't tip him off. Oh, wait, okay. No, who tipped him off? Did Mr. White
Vesper.
tip him off? Right, but then why do you say
Vesper,
Mathis is the one who betrayed him?
I don't think he said Mathis one betrayed. He said that Mathis was his friend. We may need to rewatch that scene, but I don't think Mathis is I don't think Mathis is guilty of anything here. I think it's Vesper having tipped him off about the tell and everything else.
Okay, well then, and then see, and this is where I'm struggling because if let's say for the moment, let's take your assessment, which is that Vesper's one tipped him off, and he just says that just to fuck with Bond. Entirely valid given what we know of Lashif. He just says it just to screw with Bond's head. Then why would he throw Vesper in the road? Because she's outlived her usefulness?
Yes. We've already established he doesn't Eddie, he didn't care when his own girlfriend's about to get her arm cut off. Why the
That's fair.
fuck? Why the fuck would he care about Vesper? Vesper has you have no other value to me because Bond has a code that I need. You
Okay,
can give me
all right.
nothing.
So, time to talk this out. Lashif gets the stuff from Vesper. Turns out he still loses, so he's mad at Vesper because their betrayal plan didn't work. Captures her, throws her out, hoping that Bond will kill her. Doesn't happen, realizes, oh, Bond cares about her enough to nearly kill himself, so I'm going to keep her as a way to kind of get to Bond.
Yes.
Torch doesn't work. He follows fallback plan of I'm going to torture Vesper. But between those times, Vesper says, no, I'll cut a deal with you. He's desperate enough because he knows Mr. White's basically about to knock on his door. So he goes, all right, fine. Probably planning to kill her later again anyway, once he gets the money.
Yes. So my biggest thing is I'm trying to figure out specifically when Vesper. I think Vesper would have contacted White beforehand and probably updated
Right.
White about what's going on, and that may
Right.
be when she cut a deal with White to not kill Bond until she
I
gets
think the
him
only
some
way this
money or
all
something
makes
like
sense
that.
is that if she sold out, if she tipped off Lashif, but also separately contacted Mr. White to try to take Lashif off the board.
Yes, because at this
Okay.
point in time, she cares for Bond. We've established that.
Right. Right.
So she would be trying to protect Bond, even though she knows that her lover, husband, I don't know, they never really
Right.
go to it, could be depending on her too. So she's trying to save both of the men that she loves.
Right. Right. Okay. Um, I think it is fair to say this is not clear on a single watch.
No, it is not. It is
It
not
is
at
a
all.
lot of twisting and turning, which was again, yes, there's lots of double agents and whatnot Bond films, but usually the plots are frankly not as ornate as this because uh, uh, skip it to the end real quick. The Mr. White plot doesn't even resolve this movie. It resolves in the next movie. Um, this movie ends on a cliffhanger, kind of, sort of. No, it's cliffhanger. I think it's fair to say. Because he's found Mr. White. We don't know what he's going to do to Mr. White. And the next movie, spoiler, starts immediately after this movie. So, like, 5 seconds after he says, my name is Bond, James Bonds, is when the next movie starts. So there's very clearly a much more serialized approach to this franchise, which I generally like. But it means that the subplot of who Mr. White and who the organization is, gee, I wonder if it's Spectre, turns out to be a B plot for this movie. And so the A plot, as a result, gets a bit muddled.
But that we'll never really know how the next movie was supposed to have gone because there was a writer's strike that happened. And
Oh, that's right.
I think Craig was became a writer for that movie to help make it happen and a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's why
Oh,
the next movie is an absolute fucking mess, and we're not covering it. I'll give you that spoiler. We're not covering the next movie.
sure.
Next.
I do know that they were not sure if they would get the Spectre rights, which is one of the reasons why it's the organization throughout all of this. In fact, they didn't get the Spectre rights until Spectre, which was like 10 years later.
So,
Because,
but back to this movie.
right. I said, because briefly it was called Quantum, which is why Quantum must always exist. But,
Mr. White kills all those motherfuckers except for Vesper and Bond.
right. Right. Um, so yeah, so she does betray him. which leads to another interesting, uh, uh, it's an action scene, but it's actually a not chasing. He's following her. He's just stealthing her.
How long is Bond in recovery?
Uh, maybe a week.
A week? Months? How long? Like
I mean,
it
it's
is
vague.
it's
It
hard
doesn't
to
say.
tell.
From the time that he, we don't know how long he's in hospital. Um, when he awakes in hospital, but the fact that I forget the guy, the Swiss guy who's there with the briefcase, he's pretty eager to get this done. Implies it's been a little bit of time since the poker game, but not so much time that he tried to get the money out like around by it. It's the hey, you're up. This is great. I gotta go, but could you quickly put in your account information? That'd be awesome. I gotta go. So like he's anxious to get this resolved. So it feels like to me, it feels like a few days after the events of the poker game.
Because my point is the sheer amount of physical trauma his body would have
Oh God,
taken.
yeah.
Then they showing him in a wheelchair, and then everything else. That feels like months worth of time have gone by. And if it's months, that doesn't work for the timeline and the money that they have. So we're at the point now where it was such a great movie and things are working so well that hitting stumbles in some of the plotting. And like the
Right,
analytical part of me is noticing all of these consistently.
right. Because later on when M's like, "Hey, I got a guy from the treasury here, and he's kind of wondering when the money's going to show up." Feels like they wouldn't have waited months for 15 million to come
Yes.
back into their accounts, right?
Especially if Bond has 10, $15 million and sends in a resignation letter. I'm out of here, motherfucker.
Right, and it's like, cool. We'll just give them 3 months to get the money to us. It's fine. No, no.
Yeah. Other than that,
S-
though,
yeah, I mean, so yeah, I mean, oh, by the way, just quickly note, yes, there's an underwater scene. It's not a fight. He's trying to rescue somebody, but it's still a scene that's filmed underwater. So check that off the list. But yeah, other than that, like everything after the casino is a bit muddy. Um, uh, uh, there's some truly cringeworthy lines. Uh, if only you would, because you know what I could do with a middle finger. It's like, what? No,
I think he said his little finger, Eddie, not even his middle finger.
little finger. Right? Sorry, you do my little finger. No, but I'd
Damn.
like to find out. Shut up. And then no, there's some bad lines here. Um, but I mean,
Didn't they pull a line directly from the book regarding Vesper?
probably. Uh,
That
I think.
I will not repeat on this podcast.
Oh yeah, the blank is dead. Yeah,
Very derogatory line.
yeah. Um, there's there's a lot in terms of the plot that's a bit muddy in this part. Him becoming emboldened to the mission makes a lot of sense. It's not my favorite way to get there, but it's like okay, the fact that we've ended on this is a Bond who has hardened his heart and has decided that he's going to use humor as his armor because we get mother like no you make a joke your armor's back on, so now we know the humor is his armor. So when he's quipping with Mr. White with a huge off fucking rifle in his hands, it's like, yes, this is James Bond. We're now to the fully formed James Bond that we expect to see. This has been an origin film. So in that regard, I genuinely really like Casino Royale. Um, when we started this podcast, I had said the Casino Royale is my favorite Bond film. I don't think that's true anymore. Um, I think because while I have made the argument this is a Bond film, as far as the form is concerned, it just looks different. This is still, by design, a pre-Bond film. This is a film that gets us to a better understanding of why the Bond formula exists the way it does.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't say this is my favorite Bond film. I think it's a good movie. It's a very enjoyable movie. I watched it many times. Um, but I think my initial instincts when I first saw it in the theater was in some level right. It's not quite a Bond film. It's better than a lot of Bond films. So like it's an interesting place I'm in, you know.
So for me, like I said, this is my third time watching it. It's a good film. I don't love it,
Mhm.
but I'm also trying to make sure I remove my own feelings about the film based on the Pierce Brosnan piece, which part of that goes back to the same thing for like my love of Doctor Who. Like,
Right.
while I love Sylvester McCoy, Paul McGann, not my favorite Doctor because he came after Sylvester
Mhm.
McCoy. Little things like that.
Right.
Or Colin Baker was not a Doctor I really liked because he came after Peter Davison, but now I really like Colin Baker a lot. So I have a lot of those same vibes for this movie. The movie itself is very well executed, and I think another part of it is I am not a fan of the street level gritty Bond. I
Right.
like Bond to be a little bit more pulp in vibe because they, no matter what they do, they stay at street level and they try to act like they remove the pulp factor from Bond, but they don't. And
No.
so it's a sheen over it without highlighting the better parts of it.
Right. That's actually a good way. I think you've helped articulate what I was trying to reach for is that um his healing. I mean, I think it's the most obvious one. Like, there's very clearly the pulp DNA is still there, and a chunk of the movie tries to downplay that. And it's like when you're shattering sinks and these guys bouncing up from being poisoned after like 15 seconds. He's a pulp character. Don't hide that. But again, if the goal is to get him to where the pulp character is more believable, it more or less does the job. Um, but certainly, I feel like me being a dumb nerd going, this is like the books. And the books were better. It's like, nah, I have a much different opinion now.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like as a synthesis of Dalton and Brosnan, this is exactly right. And the franchise gets uneven from here. Let's put it that way. There are some good movies after this, and there's also Quantum of Solace after this. um, but suffice to say, we now know in retrospect this is the start of a journey, the start of a serialized. Like, literally, one of my favorite fan edits is someone has taken all the Bond Daniel Craig movies and fan edited it into a 10 episode Netflix style show, and it really works that way.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That'd be
it
fun to
really,
see.
really, as long as you accept the fact that there are large gaps in Bond's career we're skipping over in that series, it really does work as something you could binge from start to finish and get a full story out of. Um, and this is just the start of that story. But as a film on its own, if I were to like, this is my favorite Bond film, I don't think it's true. I actually think Goldfinger now goes back to the top.
Yeah. For me, Goldfinger has never not been my favorite Bond film.
Right.
And if I we're not really ranking these, so to say, but if I were to rank this based on the films that we saw, it is easily above any of the Moore films.
Yes.
It's above any of the Dalton films, and that's about where it would swap. Because
Yeah,
it's
it's
below
like
Goldfinger for me. Because I really like Goldfinger
right.
because it took some of the grittiness, like a little bit, but they raised the pulp, but they cut some of the asinine humor from the Moore era at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, really. Again, we're not quite to ranking yet, but like, I mean, I knew it was going to be the top three were going to be GoldenEye, Casino Royale, and Goldfinger. It's just the order has been swapping as we go through this. So like, I was like, until we watched this, I was like, oh, Casino Royale is number one. It's like, and again, it's nothing. Nothing in the movie was like made it fall. Like this movie's really holds up well. It's just we've been carefully going. This is what makes Bond films. It makes Bond films. Makes Bond film. And while all the notes are here, again, by design, it's supposed to be Bond isn't fully formed yet. So it's not a failure on the movie's part. It's intended to be like, here you're seeing the tropes shape. So you see our new version of what that formula looks like. Just a shame that
Because
what follows is not good.
for me, this film is constantly playing a dance now, having rewatched it with From Russia with Love, back and forth. Like, those are the
Oh,
ones,
okay.
because that's a pre-ish Bond film, kind of how this is a pre-ish Bond film. So playing a weird relationship with that film for
Interesting.
me.
Interesting. That's true because we did talk about how From Russia with Love was kind of not the formula was not quite formed. So that no, that's actually a really good point. So is this movie actually more in conversation with From Russia with Love than with Goldfinger? I think
Because
the
this
answer is no. I think all Bond films are still in conversation with Goldfinger, but I could see why it stacks up better if you compare it to From Russia with Love.
yeah, but we'll have a probably more solid conclusion
Yeah, yeah.
after the last film in this Bond set that we're
Right, which is
doing.
Quantum of Solace, right? We're totally gonna watch.
Fuck yeah, man! Like that is the movie. It didn't have the writers it needed. It was like undercut, I think, for budget. Fuck no. We're gonna cover Spectre. That's right. We're gonna skip. No, we're not. We're gonna do fucking Skyfall. There's no way we would not do Skyfall because it was like the 50th anniversary, I think, of Bond or something. Anyway, phenomenal point of Bond, and so we have to talk about it from the director, from the fact that Craig originally, I think, thought that might have been his last Bond movie, which it was not, and the fact that Craig hated being Bond at some point in time in there too. There's a whole bunch of stuff for conversation to talk about, and then we're gonna
Awesome.
wrap up the Bond run.
Right, so that's gonna be our actual wrap up, even though we kind of did start an earlier wrap up on this one. Um, cool. So if people wanted to talk to you and ask you who the best money penny is, Chris, where would they find you online?
You could come and talk to me on Blue Sky at Darker Hue, or you come join my Patreon at Harlem Unbounding, where I'm dropping art because I had some art done for Haunted West that I'm giving people snippets of for like pre-drafts and
Ooh,
stuff.
awesome.
What about you?
You can find me at pugsteady.com. That's my website. That's also where I am on Blue Sky. Or if you want to give me some of your sweet, sweet money because you really love dogs and D&D, check out realmsofpugmire.com, my creator-owned game where you can do exactly that thing. And with that, we will see you next time when the sky falls.
Sky!